Hi everyone, my name is Kevin and I'm the host of Paranoid Founders. Paranoid Founders is a show where we interview business owners and founders about their challenges of scaling, growing, and defending their business. The inspiration for this show is Andy Grove. He was the former MD of Intel and he wrote a book called Only the Paranoid Survives. Today we're super honored to have the founding partner and COO of TROOPERS, Craig Goonting. He comes from a company called TROOPERS, and they are a platform that provides gig workers to employers who need temporary or part-time helps for their businesses.
Yeah.
So Craig, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about TROOPERS?
Thanks for having me here, Kevin. Really excited to talk about what we've done as a business, right? So TROOPERS is something that my partners and myself, we started the business about 8 years ago. The concept behind the business was that all of us were once part-timers ourselves, right? And so we've really been through the ups and downs, struggles and scams of being a part-timer. Back in the day, we used to experience, where we work a part-time job and we don't know when the next job is coming in, right? We don't know when we're getting paid. We were always worried about, hey, is this employer a verified employer who's actually going to ensure our payments come in, ensure that the job scope we've been given is what we're actually going to go on ground and do, right? So I think through that experience, it's something that we then felt that the way the part-time space is done here in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia can be drastically improved. Because of that, we found a need and a niche to say that we want to be the champion for part-timers. We wanted to say, hey, there's a better way to do things. You don't have to be afraid to go to work. You don't have to be worried about when your next paycheck is coming in.
That's great.
And I think because of that, we decided to build a platform to allow people to track their earnings, to get verified jobs, and work day to day without having to worry when that's actually coming in.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I also learned that you were a part-timer yourself.
Yes.
And that also inspired you to join the business and join the company. You mentioned a couple of gig works that you were doing before. Do you mind just sharing a couple of those?
I always appreciate my dad for this. While I was in university, I was making an allowance of probably $50 a week. So $200. Today, that's very little. Back then, it was still just as little because I had a car that I needed to put petrol into. I had to eat. And like any other kid in KL, I wanted to go out clubbing and partying with my friends, right? And that $50 a week just didn't cut it. So when I went to my dad and was like, can I get more money? My dad was like, if you want to enjoy life, you want to have nicer things in life, go figure it out for yourself. And so I think that really pushed me to kind of get into the groove of saying, hey, I got to go and earn my own money. I got to earn my own way in life. And if I want to enjoy life, I got to go do it for myself, right?
Sure.
And so that really pushed me into the perspective of saying, well, instead of just studying, I want to be able to saying instead of just studying, I wanted to work and earn more. And I think I started working more part-time jobs where it was like stuffing tickets, right? At concerts, at live event halls, ushering people to their seats and simple things like that. And honestly, that's where the basics of, I think, TROOPERS started as well. Looking into part-time jobs where it was just, hey, simple manpower jobs that everyday people can do. And that was the basic concept of it. And I think from working those part-time jobs, I then got the opportunity to move into a managerial position because my first mentor at that time, he would then say, hey, I'm going off for the day to go do something else. So could you take over? And so I always took that as an opportunity to be able to step up and test myself. During that time, I got moved up from saying, hey, let me just stop tickets and let me just usher people to their seats to saying, hey, I've got a team of 5 to 6 people coming in today. How do I ensure that everyone is doing their own job and making sure that the event runs well for the day?
So this was all during university?
This was all during university.
And that's crazy because you're learning about people management skills, getting deals.
Indeed.
And you haven't even graduated at that point.
I think this is something that my partners and myself really strongly believe in. One of the things we've always said is that we can't really build a future for our youth, but we can build the youth for the future. For us, I think it's always been a case where we believe that going through an education is not just going to university, going to class and studying the materials that they give you, but going through an education is both your study side, but also your experience side, right? I was thankful that I kind of figured this out a bit early on, that going out into the working world today is not the same as it used to be, where, hey, with a paper qualification, I get a job. The competition is steep, and just having their degree doesn't cut it anymore.
Fair.
Even the people that we employ today, most people that walk through our doors, I don't even look at what paper qualification they have. As a business owner, as a founder, what you're looking for are people who can actually come in and problem solve, solution providers. And so it doesn't really matter what you've learned or what you've studied. What's important is if you're coming in to do the job, can you excel in that job through the experience you have and through the solutions you can provide, right?
That's great.
Yeah.
So here's a chronology of TROOPERS. You started in 2017 and gained traction between 2018 to 2020. tapping into industries like hospitality, events, retail, freelance job. And then you had that breakthrough of that Uber partnership during COVID. The pandemic forced people to rethink hiring, and you guys adapted really quickly, providing flexible staff solution. Got your Series A funding in 2021 and launched your mobile app for gig matching, payroll management, and then after on its expansion, regional expansion beyond Malaysia. I would love to know how you did that, because as founders, we always look at just Klang Valley, but then the rest of the state, it's always hard to go deep into those local markets.
Yeah.
And then ultimately acquisition in 2023 by Better Place. So amazing story, man. Like the last 8-7 years, you must have had some sleepless nights. But you joined sometime around the founding of the business.
Yeah.
Maybe walk me through how was the first month.
So I think the first month of the business, it was definitely something very interesting for me, because a friend of mine who was working for me at the time introduced me to Josh and Kelvin. At the time, I was about to go and work in my investment banking job that I had lined up. I was like, okay, great. I'm going to be this high-flying investment banker who's going to close M&A deals and make millions, billions, right? And I think that was always the idea behind it, because when I was younger, I watched this movie, Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, Shia LaBeouf, right? I think that really gave me the inspiration to say, oh, I want to have that kind of lifestyle. At the time, when Josh actually called me up and said, hey, let's meet up, I've got this idea I want to share with you, and Kelvin and I are actually looking for someone to come in and help run the operational side of things, right? Because we need someone with the experience in running event operational stuff, part-timer things, right? I was like, okay, I don't know what you guys want, but let me just take a quick meeting. I think this sounds like a scam. I had a meeting with Josh, and he ran me through the idea of build a platform that helps part-timers find work, that helps employers be able to manage their part-timers, be able to source for part-timers. And the whole idea behind it was providing more accountability, more transparency, and more legitimacy around the gig work skills. At that point in time, when I heard the whole idea of it, I said, wow, okay, this is really something that I can see the problems that it solves. I can see the impact it makes and the value it brings to not just part-timers out there, but even employers who are looking to hire. So for me at the time, I told them, I said, no guys, I've got a great job waiting for me. I'm going to be flying overseas. I'm going to work as a big investment banker. I cannot do this business. Running a business is not something I plan to do. And so I told them, the most I can give you is a month of my time. I'm starting my job in 2 months. I can help you guys out, set some basics up, and then I've got to head off.
Sure.
And at that point in time, we were doing Uber as one of our first clients. I started going on ground day to day and hand out flyers, hiring part-timers to hand out flyers. I remember, I think Josh and Kelvin were still working a full-time job at that time.
Yeah.
And so during lunch, they would come in their shirts and suits and come down on ground and start giving out flyers as well.
This is to the drivers, right?
This was for the drivers, because Uber was recruiting drivers at the time. And so we would go down and try to convince people to become an Uber driver.
Who are these people?
Just random everyday people. We were just saying like, hey, you need to make side income, come and join Uber. We went all over the place. We went to universities. We were in Masjid Jamek walking down the street in the hot sun. We were outside office buildings, everywhere and anywhere, because I think Uber was super aggressive at that point in time. We were just kind of coming in to support that growth for them. I still remember the first job we did with them, the invoice was for about 7,000 ringgit.
Okay.
I remember celebrating with Kelvin and Josh, like, whoa guys, oh my God, we just did an invoice for 7,000 ringgit. That's amazing,
Nice.
right? It's so funny when you look back at it nowadays.
Of course.
Right? Because
To me, what's fascinating is the backbone of recruiting these drivers
Yeah.
was actually supported by a Malaysian company and by you guys.
I think it was a very interesting journey for us. We caught the market at the right time. It was a time when a lot of startup companies wanted to do a lot of marketing pushes. A lot of the initial work we did was on-ground marketing for startups and a lot of event-based jobs where it was like concerts and stuff. I think coming into the whole story, I was supposed to go work my job 2 months later, and 2 weeks into doing this, I said, wow, I love the idea that we're building. I love the concept of what we're trying to do here, and I really enjoy the day-to-day of running a business. It's been 2 weeks of high stress, really pushing you to the brink of not sleeping, because we would go on ground in the daytime. Then at night, we would all meet up in one of our houses or at a cafe somewhere and start discussing, hey, how do we build a platform? What's our revenue model? And we had discussions around, does it work to charge someone for this? If we're charging part-timers to find jobs, are they willing to pay for that? And I think that was a lot of the early phase of the business. And 2 weeks of that really got me into the spirit of it. I turned around for 2 weeks and said, yeah, I'm in it, guys. Let's do it. I'm going to not go for the job.
That's
I'm
crazy.
fully in it. Let's do this. And now, 7-8 years later, still here today, enjoying very much what I do. If I was given a chance all over again, I would not do anything else but run a business. I absolutely love it.
Awesome. I love those stories of rolling up your sleeves, going down on the ground, giving out flyers. I think if founders haven't done that, and if some of the founders out there are just thinking about ideas and ideation, the first thing you should do is go on the ground. Talk to your customers, talk to your suppliers.
100%, man. I think just for perspective, right, I've talked to new founders coming up as well. Some of them tell me, hey, the first thing I want to do right now is raise money. And I said, what are you raising money for? And some of them say, oh, I'm raising money so I can hire guys to go on the ground and do it. I'm like, buddy, no, man.
Nobody knows. Go on the ground.
Yeah, you go on the ground and do it.
If you don't get it, the person you hire wouldn't get your business and wouldn't
100%.
get the problems of your customers.
100%.
I want to dive deeper into revenue. Since this show is all about revenue, systems, and people, you talked about that 7,000 ringgit invoice. How do you guys figure out your next 7,000 ringgit? Or I'm curious to hear about the first 100,000, the first million, and the million after that. What was next after this 7,000 invoice that you had for Uber?
Yeah, the interesting thing for us was that it's always been a value proposition for us. One of the things we learned early on is it's not about how much you charge, it's really about the amount of value you bring to your customers. Customers are always willing to pay for value. It doesn't matter if it's 7,000, it's 500,000, it's 10 million. Sure. If you provide the value that they need and solve the problems they have, they're always willing to pay for the value. And I think for us, one of the things we saw growing the business was that because we always focused on giving value to our customers, the demand and revenue just kept pouring in, right? For us, it got to a point where after we opened the tap, it just didn't want to stop.
When was it? Like that must be the product market fit feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just catching up with demand. How long after the founding of the business?
I think that was probably about 5 to 6 months in. What kind of happened for us was that after running Uber at the start, people at Uber started to disperse out. We kind of realized that word of mouth was one of the strongest things for us. About 6 to 8 months after starting the jobs with Uber, a lot of people at Uber started to move to other different jobs.
And then they came back to you.
And so they would join another startup because there was this culture of people moving from one startup to another. Let's say 10 people at Uber kind of spread out. That then got us 10 new clients because every other client started coming in, your Fave, your Damakan, and all your other businesses at that point started coming back.
So these were your early adopters, and they are mostly like in startups.
Mostly in startups, event space, like your LOL events, your Shiraz projects, who came in with a lot of concert jobs.
So because I knew a lot of staffing companies. When I was working in my previous company, I recruited event agencies.
Yeah.
And they will have their side company that does staffing. Why didn't these people get to the same point as you guys have?
I think how we define our competitors is a couple of different ways, right? In the early days, we used to consider the staffing companies as competitors. Today, now having the technology and everything, I think we no longer look at them as direct competitors. But what I can tell you in the early days is that these other staffing companies, a lot of them were very profit-centric. Number two, a lot of them were very manual-based, right? A lot of them focused on, the old school way of doing it. I think for us, the thing that really drove us forward against these other companies was the fact that it was never so much about how much money we were making out of it, but about how we were looking after the part-timers, how we were building a better accountable environment that's transparent for them to be able to come into work. The focus was always building a better space for part-timers and providing better value to employers. The combination of that really propelled us forward because our thought process was never, hey, how much can you charge? How do we charge more? How do we make more? Which is one of the reasons why in the early days of the business, we used to charge following these other companies. So they'll charge 150, right? 150 ringgit and 10% management fee on top of that. And they would take a cut of the 10% management fee plus 50 ringgit and pay the part-timer 100. This created an environment where part-timers started to feel like, hey, I'm being cheated because they are actually charging 150 for me, paying me $100. Employers started to feel like, hey, I'm not sure because I paid this guy, now the part-timer is telling me he didn't get his money or didn't get paid enough and stuff like that. And so for us, in the early stage, one of the things we decided to do was say, we want to be fully transparent. We got a lot of pushback from the rest of the industry saying, hey, these are not things you can do. These are not the norm of how we run. You're going to kill margins. You're going to kill the industry that we're running, right? And I think for us, we said, no, the most important thing was making sure that we are transparent. We look after the part-timers. Our business model has always been that we charge our employers the same price that we pay part-timers. So if we're going to pay a part-timer 100 ringgit, we would charge the employer 100 ringgit, and we charge a service fee on top of that. We charge something between 15 to 35%. I think it ends up being cheaper overall for employers, better value for them. They have the transparency and the understanding of, hey, how much am I actually paying to get that value out, right? Because on the other end of things, they pay 150, they expect 150 of value, but they're getting 100 ringgit of value because the guy only gets paid 100 ringgit, right? So for us, if you're paying me 150, I'll pay the guy 150 and you'll get 150 of value.
Interesting.
Right? And so, I think that's been our revenue model for the last 8 years.
So I'm sure the first 100,000 to the first million and the million to the 10th million, they're all different challenges, right? Systems aside, because I'm sure you reach a revenue scale like, okay guys, we can't do this manually anymore. We'll talk about systems later.
Yeah.
But how difficult was it to go from 100,000 to a million to the next million and the next million? Like, what were the different challenges?
0 to 100,000 was way harder than 100,000 to a million. In the early days from 0 to 100,000, we had nothing figured out. Everything was still up in the air. We were naive founders at that point where we said, hey, we need a landing page, a website. I remember telling my partners, hey guys, I'm going to go and learn Python and figure out how to build a website so that we can save money and put a website out.
All partners, founders go through that.
So I think very early on, we started to figure out that we can't do crazy things like that because it's about the effectiveness of your time and being able to play to your skill set. At that point in time, we had a lot of systems and structures to figure out. We had to build the right people to help us build out the revenue. We had to figure out, hey, when I contact a part-timer, what's the best way to approach them? Engage with them. How do we ensure they get paid on time? What's the system? Do we pay from finance once a week? What kind of information do we need to collect from them? And there's all this nitty-gritty that sometimes new business owners come in and say, hey, I'm just going to go start this business and it's going to be 1, 2, 3 and I'm done and I'm going to make $1 million. But I think it's never as easy as that because the thing a lot of people miss out is the nitty-gritty of all the little details that it really takes for the business to succeed. One thing I've realized over time is that if you don't sort these out in the early stages, you then get to a point later on where you start to see the cracks and everything starts to crumble out. And I think once you've built that first 100,000, once you've figured out the basic structures of that, the next million is not as hard because you then just replicate that. For us, getting to that 100,000 mark, once we figured out the process and the system of how we were operating internally, that allowed us to keep repeating the same process, but just bringing in more people to support that function.
I guess it doesn't sound like revenue or demand was that big of a concern. And because you guys are in a very big market, how do you guys think about customer acquisition cost and spending on marketing?
Yeah, so for us, marketing is something that we have definitely underspent on in the many years we've been doing this. We see a lot of businesses going out there and spending a lot of marketing dollars to get back. I hope to one day try that out to see what that feels like. But we were always bootstrapping it from the very start of the business. Each of us put in like 2,500 ringgit. We had 10,000 or less in the business when we first started. High growth marketing was not an option for us. So it was always done through word of mouth. It was always done through, how well we've actually serviced our last clients. And that was actually the most effective because today we do a bit more marketing than we used to do. What I see today is that the value of the client that you get coming in, right? The level of appreciation they have for the work that we do is definitely less than back then when you've heard through word of mouth that, hey, these guys have really helped me, they've solved my problems. The client comes in truly believing in us compared to us having to go out and convince the client.
Yeah. Just curious to know what keeps you up at night. What are you paranoid about when it comes to money or revenue?
First of all, on a revenue standpoint, one thing I want to say that as partners in this business, although some of my partners lead more of the revenue functions, from early on, we've always had the responsibility that regardless whichever segment of the business you're looking after, we would still go and close our own clients, still have our own book running because we very early on figured out that top line revenue building was one of the key functions of the business. But what keeps me up at night? I think the main thing has always been the level of quality that we provide, right? So I think one of the things that we faced as we scaled the business was it got to a point where we were so focused on pushing and building revenue because demand kept coming in. And back then we were very manual. It was not easy to handle more demand. Every bit more demand meant needing more people in the company and on the ground, which was difficult to manage. As we pushed and scaled the revenue up, one of the challenges we faced was definitely growing too fast and then realizing, hey, our quality is starting to suffer, right?
How do you track quality?
So I think how we have tracked quality is that we have actually user ratings. So back then, we had this great idea. We said, hey, let's have every user be rated by the clients on a 1 to 5 star scale. Yeah, every single shift, and then we can tell how well they've done. That idea was a little bit crazy back then.
It's because there's thousands and hundreds of thousands.
It was fully manual, right? It was a great idea, but something that today we practice. But back then was really difficult because everything was manual. I couldn't go to a client and keep a sheet every single time of the hundreds and thousands of people working for us. I think what we did back then is we would measure quality by post-project meetings with clients who would then give us feedback on how we delivered on the project, what they felt were the value adds, what they felt were the crisis points during that project.
So these are like calls?
Yeah, these are like calls, these are like in-person meetings.
In the early days?
Yeah, I remember some of our more regular clients, what would happen is every Friday, they would come over to our office, we would have a session with them in our office just to go through with them to understand, hey, it's been a week, what's been your biggest challenges with using
this? Do you still do it today?
So
or are there talks to bring it back?
there are talks to get it a bit more out there,
Automate it.
because right now we've been trying to automate it a bit more, right? But we've seen a struggle, because the thing is that to try to move it into a space where we send the clients emails, or through the application we send them a form to fill to say, hey, how well have you done? How well have you done for your project? The feedback we get is maybe not as valuable because it's missing that human touch. So we've been speaking to our teams to spend more time with the clients, our business development teams, our sales teams, to spend more time just having a drink with the client to understand, hey, what are your pain points? How is the project going? But of course, it's something that we need to be able to scale. I wouldn't say we've mastered it today. It's something we're still trying to figure out how to get valuable client feedback to ensure that feedback loop is constant for us. Because I think that's the difference. If you ask me today and in the early days of the business, the feedback loop was strong because the feedback came directly to the partners, right? And so we were able to make the changes quickly. Compared to today, we've got a team of about 120 people in the office, and they then go on and engage the clients, and getting the feedback through them and then coming back to us is
so let's segue into systems, because this sounds like it's a systems thing. Founders are always told to skill themselves because we can't take every customer call or do everything ourselves.
Yeah.
Walk me through the early setup of process, workflow systems. You built your application in 2021, so I'm sure there were a lot of considerations on like why, how, when to do it.
Yeah.
So walk me through a bit about the tech and the systems. Yeah.
I think the tech, very early on, we always knew what we wanted to do, right? That was always clear from day one. Like when we talk about the days back when we were doing Uber, we were very clear about the app we wanted to build, the features we wanted in it, right? And how we wanted it to run. The problem we had, I think, at the start was that when we first started the business, like I said, having less than 10,000 in the bank account, there was no option to go and hire a tech team, to hire a CTO, to start coding and building this app. And none of us had the experience to be able to do that. Right?
Except you had a Python experience.
Yeah, that we tried, right? Obviously, big failure there. I think throughout that process, we ended up saying, hey, we're going to spend the time learning a little bit more, doing it manually, and really fully understanding to ensure that the ideas and concepts we have in building the system are actually solving people's problems. I think that manual phase of us doing the business, if I could do it all over again, I think I would still go back and do the manual phase rather than saying build the technology and systems from day one. It allowed us to have a lot of insights into what people really want and what impacts people.
Was it mostly Excel sheets?
Yeah, it was mostly Excel sheets, WhatsApp messages. I remember it was just a whole bunch of WhatsApps, and then we would put their names into an Excel sheet and we'd say, okay, this guy is working 2 jobs next week, and then someone calls you and says, hey, I need to cancel my shift tomorrow, and you're like, okay, which guy is this? Cancel the shift. It was really a headache.
Just curious to know, when did you move out your Excel sheet? So let's say 2017 you started the business, there was the first Excel sheet, probably multiple Excel sheets. When did you guys actually ditch the Excel sheets? And what was the signal?
I think finally stopped handling sometime late 2021 probably, right? So that's 4 years of doing manual work, man.
Saved a lot on tech.
It was a struggle. Even up to today, we don't spend a lot on tech, but for the first 4 years, doing those Excel sheets really helped us learn a lot of things. Once we launched the app, it wasn't an instant change like, hey, the app is here, we have the process, now let's move off the Excel sheet. One of the things we realized was that people were so embedded into working these Excel sheets, and now they had to figure out how to...
The team, you mean?
Yeah, the team. Our team internally had to figure out how to pivot. And we had internal resistance where people would be like, hey, you need to use the app to manage the part-timers. And they're like, oh no, but I've already built my Excel sheet, everything's here already. Yeah, so there was a lot of internal resistance to that. And I think it took us really pushing very hard and making a insistent cutoff date to say that, hey, post this date, everything needs to go on the app.
How many months after you guys launched the app?
It took us 8 to 10 months after launching the app to get the internal teams to start properly using it. It took a while, but the app was a system that I think we really appreciate today. It used to be really difficult. When a client comes in and says, I need 30 people a day for 30 days, it's about 900 people a month. It was a struggle for us because it would mean that, hey, I've got one guy and he can manage maybe 3 of those things running because he would need to schedule everything and stuff. But with the app today, one guy can manage maybe 10, 15, 20 projects that are of a similar size with no issue because everything is all just click, move this here. It automates, where people go and how people check in, check out. Because back then when people even checked in for work, they would have to come into the job and send us a WhatsApp text and say, hey, I'm at work. And then we wouldn't be able to verify that. Sure. They would just send us a picture and say, I'm here. We would have to call the client and say, these 10 people have said they've arrived at work. Are they really there? The systems we then started to build around that was a geolocation check-in system. When people show up at the site of work and let's say they're working in a building here, what would happen is if they were outside the radius of the building, they would not be able to check into the app. They would need to take a photo picture to show, okay, I'm actually here at the job. It checks your geolocation and then it timestamps to say you've checked in at this time and started work. And when you check out, you do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And that has helped us increase the effectiveness of our check-ins in knowing whether people have actually showed up for work. Now, when we go back to clients, we're able to say, hey, I can verify for you that
Yep.
these 5 people showed up for work today.
That's
right?
great.
Because we can see based on their location, where they've checked in and what time.
So is that how you measure your efficiency? You must have an ops person doing all this, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you will look at how many shifts or how many people can they manage.
We look at the total number of shifts we're able to fill. So some of the metrics that we look at is, first of all, how many shifts a client has requested, right? So let's say a client has requested 1,000 shifts. We look at our fulfillment rate. One of the values we provide clients is the ability to always ensure that we have a fulfillment rate of 95% and above. And so for every 1,000 people, we need to ensure that we have 950, 980 people showing up for the job. Some of the things that we do through that is we even hire backup talents on the app, right? Now the app actually allows us to put in backups to say, hey, these 3 guys are ready in case any of the 1,000 people fall out, they're going to step in.
Do you pay them more for last minute?
Yeah, so we pay them a fee to be on standby. And then if they get activated into the job, they get paid their full salary and stuff.
That's great.
Right? And if they don't get activated, they earn the fee. And so I think some of the measures we look at is things like your no-show rates. So you're in Malaysia here, we call it FFK. So our no-show rates or FFK rates, right, is basically saying that because what happens if we have talents who say, hey, I want to work tomorrow, and dealing with part-timers, right, these are probably not long-term based workers. So it's very easy for them to come in and say, hey, tomorrow I'm not going to show up for work. They say, yeah, I'm coming in. And the next morning you call them, you can't get a hold of them.
On the
right?
way,
They're gone.
or you can't even reach out.
Yeah, you can't even reach out to them and they don't answer the call. We have something for no-show rates, the metrics that we track, and we constantly try to improve upon in the way that we handle that. One of the things the system has allowed us to do is through handling these no-show rates, what happens now is these guys get penalized. These are things that we were not able to do before the system. If you think about gig work and part-time work maybe 5-10 years ago, if it was a part-time job and I call the guy to come and work for a part-time job, if he doesn't show up, I never see this guy again. The next employer who's hiring him has no idea what he's done before this, how well he's done or how badly he's done or whether he's not shown up for work. Now what the system and the app has allowed us to be able to do is that if this guy doesn't show up for work, that creates a strike on his profile. So if he works any other jobs with any of our other clients, right, he actually will have shown that, hey, this guy has a low rating because he has not showed up for 1 or 2 jobs before, right? And he has not even informed us that he's not showing up for the jobs, right? And so I think this pushes talents to be more mindful. They're more accountable for the shifts that they actually book. They don't just say, yes, I'm going to come to work and then not show up, right? I think this has improved talent show-up rates and quality as a whole towards clients.
That's great.
Because there's more responsibility, more accountability. On top of tracking their show-up rates, we also track their performances. And the system allows us to then say, how do we get better quality talent? How do we upskill? So we built this thing called Troopers Academy, right? One of the things that we want to be able to do is show our clients that we can provide better quality talent than what is available in the market.
Yep.
And we do this through upskilling, learning and development and training through our internal resources, where talents actually come in to work with us and they may not have any skills. So one of the examples is there are talents who want to work in the F&B industry, right? And they need food handling certificates. So what we do is we provide the training in-house. They come in, get the training. They get badges through the app that actually signifies that, hey, I've been upskilled, I've been trained, I've learned this, and then they can apply for the job. Similarly, other courses that then teach them to upskill themselves allow them to then earn more money to be able to work more variety of jobs. And I think this system has been an integral part, because if you told me I need to keep track of 10,000 guys who all have different training levels, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I actually downloaded your app a couple of days
Nice.
ago. I was playing around with it, going through the onboarding experience. I saw the academy with the RM0 so that people can just dial in and get their
correct. Yeah,
badges,
our training
right?
is fully free for now.
Super cool. What are some of the things that happened outside of your control with the part-timers, things that didn't go well and didn't go as planned?
One of the challenges we face is that the product that we handle is the app, but the app connects 2 different sets of people, right? Which are your part-timers looking for jobs and your employers looking for part-timers. And I think the big challenge for us is that both ends of the spectrum, usually let's say you work in a cafe, right? If you're selling a drink, one end is a customer, which is a human, and the other end is a drink, which you have a lot of control over how you make, how you build, the level of quality. One of the struggles for us was that both ends of the spectrum were humans who have their own emotions, their own day-to-day troubles. It's been a very big challenge for us because it meant that we didn't have full control over the way they behave.
Yeah, you're a platform.
We're a platform, right? This talent could be delivering and performing for the next 10 days, and suddenly on the 11th day, he has something that happens with his family, or he breaks up with his girlfriend, something happens and he doesn't show up for work.
Yeah.
Or we've had people who come in and then say they had a fight with someone at work. These are things that, as much as we would like to be able to control and moderate, it's just unforeseen circumstances because it's humans.
And I guess for a platform, many of the Ubers of the world, the Airbnbs of the world, you can't just say that we're just a platform, because you have your responsibility or your duty to make sure you assess them, you filter
100%.
them. So if something goes wrong, say in an event and they cause an injury on someone, do they go after your part-timers or do they come after you? Have you experienced that before?
Throughout the process, what I can say is in the early days when we first started the business, it was definitely a struggle for us, right? Because one of the things dealing with people is that it's unexpected. People are on the way to work, and we've had a lot of cases where part-timers get into an accident on the way to work. We've had quite a number of cases where part-timers say their phone has dropped and broken, or they've lost their phone, it's been stolen. One of the things that we've been able to help with over the years and been able to kind of solve that element of it is we actually came up with something called Troopers Protect. Right? So Troopers Protect, I think, Kevin, you're also working closely with us on this one, right? From an insurance perspective. And Troopers Protect is something that we've built that is currently given to our part-timers where they are insured when they come into work, right? So if they're on the way to work and they end up in an accident, or if, let's say, they have lost their phone or it's broken, and they have no access now because without their phone, they can't access more jobs with this, right? Troopers Protect actually helps them be able to cover the cost of these things, to cover the cost if they end up getting hospitalized and stuff from the accident, to ensure that instead of us having to always worry about whether these guys are covered, whether they're okay, we've built a system that allows us to say, hey, don't worry, if you work with Troopers, it's not like your other part-time jobs back in the day where you don't have these sorts of coverage, right? We provide a coverage for them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How do you sleep at night, man? You're the COO, and these are all operational human issues.
When you talk about paranoid founders, I think in the early days, dealing with the operational side of the business, you would spend your weekends worrying every time your phone buzzes because you see your phone buzzing and the client is calling on the weekend.
Yeah,
this can't be good, right? Something's gone wrong and you have no control over it. You could be having the best weekend ever and a client calls and says, hey, the laptop's broken. What are you going to do about it now? Are you paying for it, right?
That's worse than being an insurance agent.
Yeah. I'm very thankful for my partners. In the early days, I led a lot of the operational work. To be honest with you, that got to be a lot as of the last 2 years. I'm now looking after a lot of the Singapore market.
That's
Josh has thankfully taken over the operational side here in Malaysia. I must be honest, I think my weekends changed after I headed off the operational side to Josh.
Yeah, you look like you have not slept.
I think he's the one who's in the struggle now where client calls and complains and then it's straight into action. Your day sometimes just goes way off tangent.
How's that going to scale? When do you start to think about, okay, maybe we need some kind of shifts to take care of these unexpected incidences? You probably learn enough to know how to handle them, right? Setting up a system. It can't always be call Josh or call Craig.
Correct.
So how are you thinking about managing that?
What we've been building in the app today is that there are a lot more features that allow the clients to report a shift, to make a report on part-time, rather than us having to deal with every little small report, right? Like, example, some guy's shoe broke and now he needs a new shoe during work. Instead of us stepping in for all of that, there is a reporting system through the app that allows our clients to say, hey, there's an issue here, I would like to report this. And then we have our managers actually go in. If it needs human intervention, they deal with it. If it's just a concern our clients are raising that impacts the shift ratings and stuff like that, that's something they can do through the app. So that's kind of filtered out a bunch of things already, right? Where our operational guys are then able to say, okay, this subset of things the client can manage on their own because they will go through the app and the app will sort it out for them. The next subset needs human intervention. The managers step in and say, okay, I need to go in and go on the ground, get this done, speak to the client. Nowadays, we manage the top 10% of
so if you get a call, it's really bad lah.
If you get a call, it's really bad.
No wonder you get anxiety. No wonder you get anxiety when you get a call, right?
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's awesome. I want to talk about people, but I realized that on top of managing your internal team, you're also managing tens of thousands of. So you guys must be great people managers, because that's the toughest part of scaling from 10 people to 100 people. How do you think about training managers? How do you handle people? How do you recruit people? How do you retain them? I'm curious, how was the first 10 hires like, and then how was the 10th hire to the 100th hire different?
One thing I can say is that in the 8 years of doing this, people management is probably one of the single hardest things we've had to do. No one taught us, right? You don't learn any of this in school. There's no one, even if you want to go out and look to people for it, the difficulty around it is that it's such a subjective topic. It's not a one size fits all. One of the things I've seen over the years is that when it comes to people management, it's not saying, hey, I have this one way of doing it and this works for everyone. Because you may have a team of 10 people, and having a team of 10 people means I need to know 10 different ways around handling each and every person, right? Because some guys respond better towards a harder style, some towards a softer style. Some need a bit more training and development through the process. And
What's your mantra? I will fact check with your direct employees.
yes, so I think my personal style, I like people who can come in. So the team around me, people who have their own self-drive and achieve something better in life, right? From people like that, I give them the space to be able to do that, but with me standing in to say, hey, let me guide you through this space, right? So a lot of times when a person comes into me, the first thing I ask them is, hey, what do you want to achieve out of this process in the next year? And when we have that end goal, and I think that's very similar to how I live my own life as well, ensuring that you have an end goal to work towards and not just saying, let's just get into the day-to-day and just be doing it for no reason.
What I learned about that is, it's great if they can give you an answer about their end goal and what they want to achieve in life.
Yes.
But for those who don't know,
and there's a lot of them, right?
I would say 2 out of 3.
Which is why I think it's so important, because a lot of times when I have that conversation with the people under me, it's the first time they're even thinking about and coming up with the concept of me having something to target, having a place to get to. That really helps them have a better thought process of how they do their things, why they do their things, and I find that gives them the motivation to wake up every day and say, hey, I'm doing this for a reason. A lot of people maybe go through life because we were never taught any of these things. I think when we went to school, it's about, hey, how good are your grades? How much are you studying, right? But it's never really about, okay, where do these grades take you?
Yeah.
What's the next step from there? It's more about teaching people how to think rather than just giving people orders. What I always try to do is to build thinkers and doers around me rather than just people who follow instructions. I'm not very big on just relaying instructions and saying, hey, you do this means you do this. I always want people, and I always appreciate team members who can give their feedback and say, hey, actually, I think we can do this in a better way.
Sure.
And I'm always open to that because there are people who come back and in my team now and say, I disagree with your idea. I don't think that your idea is the best. I think there's a different way we can do this. It's going to be better. And I always tell them, if you can come up with a good enough structure about it and the goals for it and how we're going to measure that, I'm always willing to try that way. Yep. Because I don't believe that I have the best solution as well. And I think as partners and founders of this business, we can't solve every problem ourselves. To be able to scale, we need to build a good team of people that can then come in and think about solving these problems and actually help us solve the 100, 200 different problems and fires that we have every day.
So Troopers is in the business of hiring. What is your secret sauce in hiring Troopers employees?
This is something very near and dear to me because one of the functions I actually lead within the business is our HR function.
Okay.
When we first started, it was like every other company. How many years experience you have? What's your qualifications? But today, it's grown into a concept where I think my team calls being Troopers-fied, right? So if you're going to be Trooper-fied, it means to have a level of drive and passion that comes internally from the joy of doing what we do. There are a lot of people who come in and work for us not because of the money we pay them, but because of the joy of being able to say, we're providing something valuable to the society out there, right? We actually have part-timers who come back to us and say, thank you so much for starting this app because it helps me be able to earn my income, right? If not for the app, I wouldn't be earning the money I earn today. I'm earning more than I used to in my other job doing Troopers. And I think that drives a lot of the team members. They feel a passion towards what we do. And I think the people that we look for today are people who really have the right passion and drive. And for us, it's not about how much you know, but it's about, do you have a passion, a drive, and a goal?
Yeah.
If you have that, we can build you up.
So what's a typical interview process like? What kind of questions do you ask that is like super unique to your business?
The honest truth, it's never really about the questions we ask.
Okay.
The honest truth is, it's about the mannerisms they come in, the style in which they think about the processes of things. I can't even pinpoint to say any one question we ask is superbly important. I'll give you an example. I did an interview with a candidate a week ago. I walked out of the interview with my team and we looked at each other and said, wow, that's great. Let's hire her on the spot because we went in for the interview and the first question I asked was, tell me a bit about yourself, what's your background? And after she did that, the next question I asked was, how much do you think this whole marketing piece is going to cost us? And instead of her giving me a straight answer, she said, that's great. Let me give you perspective to that. She pulls out a laptop, an iPad, she hands it over to us, opens the deck.
Prepared already.
Prepared. She picks up some marker pens and starts drawing on the whiteboard and says, okay, this is my plan. Step one, we're going to do this. I've seen that you guys have this problem, this problem, this problem. This is step one. Okay, so what I'm going to do to solve this is I'm going to take you here, I'm going to do this. And she had a whole 6 to 12 month plan planned out. And this was a girl who was just coming in for an interview, not even working within the business. And then I could see her passion for understanding what we do, for wanting to be able to solve the problems we have and build this business into something bigger and better. And I think that alone convinced me to want to bring her in because of the attitude she had around it.
Were there some early growing pains when it comes to people?
Oh, there were a lot of early growing pains. One of the challenges that I think we've had is keeping the people you have up to par with the speed of the business growth, right? So one of the things that we have seen very apparent over the years is that people that we brought in the early days, some of them sometimes struggle to keep up. The business might grow faster than the people.
That's classic.
Right? And I think that's a very painful point for us also because the struggle is knowing when they can still be brought along and knowing when they're stuck and how do we then get them to where the business is today.
So what kind of conversations do you have with them?
It's gone both ways, right? We've had difficult conversations where there were people with the business in the early days which we truly appreciated the value they brought, but it just got to a point where they were not bringing the same value today. Some of them were more open about the conversation, some less. And we have people today working in the business, Caleb and Dylan, right, have been with us since, I think, day one, right? And honestly speaking, throughout their journey in the business, there have been points where they hit their own limitations as well. And I think they're still with the business today because as they hit those limitations, they kind of recognize the point that it was one of three things, right? It's either I'm out of here or I figure out something quickly to build myself to the next point, or I take a step down and do a bit of a lower role for the business first, while in the meantime, I build myself up and grow myself to be able to then move back up.
Do you tell them? I mean, I'm sure they needed to hear the feedback first, right? Rather than just self-realization.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are some people who have enough maturity to self-realize.
Yes.
But for the most part, you would have to sit down and tell them.
100%. So I think what we try to really push nowadays is we try to push either weekly or fortnightly sessions with our direct reports, right? To have that constant feedback loop so that they're not just coming into work every day and thinking, you as a team leader just thinking, this guy's not doing well, and you think that yourself, and it really goes nowhere.
What's
right?
the question you ask that makes them go like, oh my God?
One of the main things is we usually ask them, what have you achieved for the business in the last week? What have you actually successfully completed that has helped progress the business forward? Right?
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times brings them to the thought process of thinking, am I doing enough in my role to provide what is needed for the business? Or am I just coming in and out every day and not really providing that value?
I have a really good one. What we've learned is when we were doing annual performance review, I don't know how you do it in your company, but you will always have a band, right? Below expectation, meet expectation. When we were doing this in the past, we realized that some of them might be shocked. Who doesn't want to be exceed expectation, right?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they exceed expectation. So nowadays, we try to ask, at least on a monthly basis, and say, if we were having our annual performance review right now, what do you think you will rank?
Yeah, no.
If they're mature enough, they will ask you the same question.
Yeah.
Because they will know where they stand.
Yeah.
Showcasing all these projects are great, but ultimately it's about expectations.
I was having a one-on-one with one of my team members, and one of the questions she actually came up to ask me, right? This wasn't even from my end, and she literally came into the room and said, I'm doing this right now. How do you think I'm doing? I said, I think you're doing pretty good here. And she said, well, I don't just want to be at this level. My goal is actually I want to be here. How can I get there? Right? What do I need to do more of? I'm thinking of this and this and this. Those, I think, are really powerful conversations to have. And if you are a team member working in the team, I think it's really good to have that thought process. And if you're a leader for the team, to always be initiating that thought process. Like what you said, I think asking that question and getting them to rate themselves is always a very powerful factor.
Because you bridge the different levels of expectation.
Yeah.
Because some people might be doing things and they think they're exceed, but actually they're below. But you don't get the opportunity to bluntly say these things.
Because I think there are team members who I've given feedback to, and then after that I hear like, oh, they're confused as to why that was the problem. Because they said, no, I don't really feel that about this whole way. I'm thankful to have really good managers under me who have also helped support in that phase, because they've then gone in post my conversation with them to explain like, hey, actually the reason we do it this way as a company is because this is the impact it makes. And some of them maybe don't see the big picture of how it translates across.
How do you tell when someone is ready to be a manager?
That's one of the toughest questions to answer as a leader, because in the world today, people get promoted to managers because they're doing really well in their job.
Individual contributors.
Yeah, in their role. But the problem that I have seen over the last couple of years is that when you have a guy who's performing as a really good ops guy on the ground, it doesn't mean he's a great manager because he was good at his job, but being a manager has 10 other aspects to it, knowing how to handle people, the different styles you need to lead in, how to actually manage the day-to-day. One thing that I want to do more of, which I think we're trying to build a bit more of, but it's not done as well as I would like it to be, is to have a process where every time someone is moving up into a managerial level,
Train the managers.
to have a proper training session.
I have a guy. Yeah.
That's good. I think you should pass me his contact.
You can also claim your HRDF. They have the train your manager module.
Okay, I definitely want to take a look at that because it's something I want to do more of. I have tried to input a bit into it. We're doing it ourselves internally where we say, going up to a managerial level, you need to sit in with a training session with HR, but it's not quite there yet.
Right? Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. I think I just want to wrap up with a few things. What is Craig like outside of work? What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? I actually am a Dota player. I love to play Dota. And the reason why I mention this, I think it brings some relevance back to work because Dota 2 is an online mobile game which I really enjoy playing with my friends, where it's a game, you and 4 other friends, so it's a party of 5, goes online and you fight against another party of 5 in the Battle of the Ancients. It's a very difficult game. One thing I enjoy about it is the learning curve is so high that it really pushes me and challenges me to spend time learning, developing, and honing my skills. And I can tell you, I've been playing the game for about 12 to 15 years now.
Yeah.
I'm still at a novice level. Okay, I'm nowhere near good at the game.
Some game.
Right? But why I bring that up is because one of the things I think running a business has kind of had to bring me to the realization of adulting is that when we first started the business, I used to play Dota every day. Like right before we started the business, I used to be an everyday thing. As we started the business, I then transitioned into maybe playing it like 2-3 times a week.
Yep.
And it got to a point, very interesting enough, that I had to give it up entirely. For the first 5 years of the business, it just came to a point where I didn't have the time anymore. It was working Monday to Sunday, morning to night. By the time you were done with everything for work, you were too tired and it was just grind. I think one of the big things people don't see is the sacrifices that you have to make as a founder to be able to run the business and to be able to succeed at running the business.
For sure. It's been great having you here. Really appreciate you going into some of the more sensitive part of the conversation and also for sharing your experiences. I hope you all the success. I know you are expanding to a few other countries.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Craig, for being on the show. My name is Kevin. I am the host of Paranoid Founders, and I also run an insurtech business that focuses on business insurance.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me. It's been great sharing about Troopers today. Really enjoyed the talk we had.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.